CubeSats. I don't know if you've ever played around with CubeSats. I have. And this is a really neat setup. I mean, if you have like 20K that you want to spend for your RF investigations. But if you don't, we're glad you're here for our presentation. Because today we're going to go over what is RF hacking, some fun case studies, yes, because we have to see what trouble other people have caused. We're also going to tell you how you can build your own RF lab for $30 to, I think, $1,500. Yeah, give or take. And then we're going to go into, if anyone has, I don't know, what are they called? Flipper Zeros?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Spoon toys.
I mean, I think you might have even had the chance and opportunity to win one. So we're going to go in-depth design on Flipper Zeros and some of the cool things that you can do with those. So without further ado, what is RF? Now, I know I don't have any of my slinkies with me, as I would for the K through 12 students, but RF is essentially one portion of the electromagnetic spectrum. In layman terms, waves. RF are waves, and it's usually measured in hertz. So if you look at this gorgeous NASA image, we're like dealing with the portion here on the left. But what can you do with RF? Well, thankfully, a lot of our devices, for their convenience, or ours, are now RF controlled. I have a lovely joke. Wow, what do pacemakers and satellites have in common? One, both are hard to operate once deployed, and two, both are vulnerable to RF. Haha, I don't know if that's such a great joke. But a lot of things are vulnerable to RF or controlled by RF. We have drones, we have SCADA systems, we have IoT devices. Oh, did I just use a bunch of buzzwords? Yes, I did. Huh. All right, moving on. Your car garage, your light bulbs in your house. All of these have RF involved, usually, if, like, well, not mine, because I'm paranoid, but most people's do. Now, there have been a lot of cool case studies of things that have been hacked by RF. Now, this is one of my favorite case studies. One, because it involves a teenager who learned too much information. And two, because of its devastating impact. Here's how the story goes. And yes, I'm dramatizing it for our audience members here. We have a teenager who attends his local electronics class thinking it'd be cool, high school fun, right? Well, he gets out his universal remote, programs it. I think he spent, like, what, 3 months developing? I forget exactly, but you can read all about it on the MITRE website. He reprograms his local train tracks. You know, that switch out there that tells the train to go this way or that way. After he derails a couple of trains, they investigate it and find out, oh man, maybe his mischief isn't that great. So, first case study, hacking trains. How you can have fun too. All right, now, this is my focus area and love, cybersecurity of satellites. And I'm so glad that Ed mentioned DEF CON, because they had Hackasat 4. Oh my gosh, there was these teams up there that are actually hacking a satellite that's in orbit. Okay, you probably don't know this, but remember how servers are like 1U, 2U? Well, satellites have a similar styling guide. We call them 1U, which is 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters. They launched a 3U satellite into orbits, and who was they? That's the Air Force Research Lab. Now, we have prizes to give out. And for my first question for one of the prizes, and no, I'm not telling you what it is, does anyone know the name of the satellite that they launched? Yeah, the name of the CubeSat. I thought this was such a good question. All right, well, I guess I'll save that to the end then. It's called Moonlight. I thought it was a pretty name, but I have a thing for satellites. Well, if you go back to the slide, those 3 teams that you see featured there were not only able to access Moonlight, they were able to use the payload above Moonlight to take pictures of the Earth and send it down. Now, thankfully, these are good guys doing good things, but imagine that is in a malicious category. Moving on. Pacemakers. You knew I was going to throw in medical devices, didn't you? Of course I am. pacemakers, just like satellites, have a lot of vulnerabilities, and they're controlled wirelessly. Fantastic. Now, thankfully, there's a lot more people looking out for medical devices than there are for satellites. Makes me sad, but it's true. And they actually had a recall of over 350,000 pacemakers that they had to update their firmware because they were slightly vulnerable to a man-in-the-middle attack. Kind of a problem, especially with the academic paper I was reading telling me how they don't really investigate pacemakers after the fact if someone dies from them. I'm like, oh, so you're telling people how to get away with murder. Oh my goodness. Moving on before I get in trouble. Now, how do I break this down for you? How do you get involved or you get, kind of information on RF hacking? Well, yes, this is a very, very oversimplification of schematics. So people that are actually in this field, please forgive me. People that are not in this field, please let me break this down even further. You have really two parts. Something that's hardware that allows you to detect, receive, or interpret radio waves. In this case, typically it's an antenna. And then something that's software that allows you to analyze the information that you've detected or collected. Now, what's really cool, even though it's been around since the 60s, are software-defined radios, or SDRs. These devices allow us to simply and in a way detect or receive radio signals. Next slide. Now, I promised you for $30, right? For $30, you can buy one of these off of Amazon. This is an RTL SDR. Now, what's really great about them is they were made famous because, another hacker was able to go in and like, wow, this device made to actually interpret TV channels can be used and reprogrammed. That's super cool. And thus, the RTL SDR became even more popular than it is today. That small device can allow you to receive only signals. But what signals can you receive? No weather satellites, information from your local airport, other satellites, really anything. Like I had a couple of guys that were on their radios, walkie-talkies around me, and I'm like, oh, I'm just listening into their conversation. Oh, this is fun. This has the capability of amazing things, and it's a great starter hardware device. You actually get if you buy the packet, you get these cute little rabbit-eared antennas. I've seen them in movies. I think people used to use them to actually watch TV. Whoa, so cool. Other devices, we got the HackRF. This is a little bit more expensive, but Great Scott Gadgets makes a lot of great things. It's about $350, but what really is important when you talk about these devices is what frequencies can you interact with. The two devices I just made, I'm thinking more, high-end FM radio, AM radio. I'm thinking in those spectrums. But if you have look at our Wi-Fi Pineapple or your Perini, you'll notice that they have specialized frequencies that they are used to interact with. One thing when buying your antenna, buy the antenna to interact with the frequency that you want to collect or investigate. Very important. Next slide. We have software. Now, what's really great about these two software sets, they're free. I like the price. I think it works really, really well. I also like to recommend these two subset of softwares because they have a lot of tutorials that will walk you through step by step on how to get started. So we have GNU Radio up here, and I actually have the tutorial page right here. It's great. Videos walking you through how to use it and how to set it up. But if you want to get it kind of an idea, it's kind of like drag and drop. I want a signal processor. Click, click. Oh, I have one. I'm going to connect it to a receiver. Wow. It's really fun, and it's an easy way to get started. And with this, you can actually build a device using your antenna to sniff radio signals. I actually had a coworker. His wife bought a car, and it's really interesting. It's a brand new car from the dealership. He was sniffing it with his little device because, most of the people I work with are super cool and invent things all the time. And he found out they actually left a GPS locator device in his wife's car that he's been driving around for the week. Of course, they immediately went and took it back to the dealership, and they had them remove the device because they paid for the car outright. And he didn't like the fact that his wife was being tailed and trailed. Minor detail. But with this, you can actually make signal processors that allow you to analyze the signals, detect the signals, repeat the signals, and other things. Universal Radio Hacker, for those of you that went to DEF CON this year, there's a great information on how to hack restaurant pagers. Make those go off. I don't know the point of it, but if it can get me in front of Olive Garden sooner, maybe. But now, for the moment you've all been waiting for, I'm going to turn it over to Scott. We're going to go over the Flipper Zero.
Alrighty. So this is kind of like a little multi-tool for tons of cyber and a lot of RF. So it's capable of RFID, NFC, Bluetooth, sub-gigahertz transceiver stuff, and you can add more to it with the GPIO on top. And these are running about 169, so that's kind of like your middle of the road. But the good thing is they've got open source firmware, so there's been tons of tools built for it. So these capabilities, the RFID, you can handle your basic low frequency, high frequency. NFC, you can read, you can write, you can emulate your own key cards. And it handles all the popular MyFair protocols you use. And as far as sub-gigahertz goes, you've got 3 bands that the hardware is capable of. The lower 300, 400 megahertz, that's where all your access control is. So this is garage doors, car key fobs, and then like swing arm gates and stuff like that. And then you've got a little bit of higher frequency, and that's where POCSAG, this is a pager message coming through. You can sniff those. But if you want more, you can add Wi-Fi to it, spin up your own malicious access points with login pages on them. You can run DAuth attacks, all kinds of fun stuff. The LoRa module, that's kind of a long-range, low bit rate IoT protocol. You can sniff all the traffic there. The mag spoof here, if you give it magnetic track data from a card, it's got a coil in it, and it can replicate that. And then there's a lot of multi-purpose ones. This one's got Wi-Fi. It's got a camera on it, an NRF module for 2.4 gigahertz stuff, and then an external antenna for even greater range. So what can we actually do with it? Right out of the box, you can use the rollback exploit. This was unveiled last year at Black Hat. It's kind of a clever replay attack for car key fobs. Only some manufacturers are vulnerable, but essentially you can capture a couple lock commands and an unlock, and if you replay them back right, you're in the car. Lots of gates and doors, lots of access control. A lot of these swing arm gates, you can brute force the protocol they use. Pretty easy, there's built-in tools for that. Even brand new modern garage doors, a single capture, and you've got the key. You can get in the house. And then kind of a fun one, the little handicap door buttons that you bump to open them up, they're all 433 megahertz. Capture that, replay it, mess with people, spook some people. And then you've got kind of an older one. Open Sesame was about 10 years ago. Sammy Kamkar found a way to brute force older garage doors. He actually implemented it on the IM-Me. Uses kind of a similar radio to the Flipper, but it's just a kid's toy they modified. But the fun stuff is when you get into Wi-Fi. You can pop an ESP32 on top of it, put the Wi-Fi Marauder firmware on it, and now you can run DAuth attacks, knock people off of networks, create your malicious APs, fake login pages. You can even do packet captures and dump the PCAPs later to check out what's going on. And if you throw a GPS module on it, you can go war driving with it. You can also put an NRF module on there. Check out the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum. Someone's written a driver for it and a sniffer. And if you can find the address of a wireless mouse, you can hijack that connection and appear as an HID device to whatever computer it's connected to. And there's also a really nice looking channel scanner for finding those devices. But you're not going to get very far without a custom firmware for it. You got a couple good options here. The Unleashed firmware, removes all the transmit restrictions, higher power, more bands. Opens you up to a couple more sub-gigahertz protocols on top of the built-in, just AM and FM basic stuff, and gives you a separate pack of all the little programs and plugins that you need to run. But if you're lazy like me, you're going to want the Roguemaster, because all that's rolled into one, and it's like a 2-minute install, and you're off to the races. And it's updated usually daily, sometimes twice daily. It's pulling from dozens of open source projects, so you're getting kind of the bleeding edge of what people are working on. And you also might want an asset pack. This is holding tons of little sub-gigahertz files you can replay, infrared, default NFC keys. He's got one that's paywalled for $10 a month, but it's got tons of stuff to get you started playing with. And if you're working on something a little weird, you might want to make your own assets. So Flipper Toolbox is a collection of Python scripts for analyzing, editing, and generating your own NFC cards, infrared packets, and sub-gigahertz files. And if you want something a little bit easier, Flipper Maker does pretty much the same thing, and it's all web-based. One of the questions lately has been the legality of the Flipper. Earlier in the year, it got banned from Amazon's storefront because it was coming up as a card skimming device. Kind of technically right. But it's still perfectly legal here. You can buy it from their Flipper store online. It's all governed by the FCC in the US. These are the bands that the hardware is capable of. And FCC says you got to stay in that little sliver in the middle.
Now, speaking on that, and this is something I want to do very seriously because the lawyers say I have to, and I don't want you to get arrested. Please don't do illegal things. Yes, there are actually people who get paid to listen and monitor radio frequencies to see if there are people doing illegal things. I can't believe that's actually a job, but it is. And there are lots of problems if you do these things. Fines, prison, and probably the worst of all, loss of RF operating permissions. That means no more computers, aka millennial death. I also want to go into one other thing, and this was only if we had time. Oh yes, these are all our references, because yes, we referenced everything. There are also a lot of things out there right now that might not have happened. So you have to be careful. There are things you can do, and there are things you cannot do. For example, in this case, a gentleman said he used a Flipper Zero to hack a smart meter. Now, it was really cool because, like, you actually saw the puff of magic smoke come out of the smart meter. I mean, that's pretty awesome. But it probably didn't actually happen. I think Hackaday was the one person that put up there that they're like, hey, he bought a really, really old smart meter. He rigged it like this, and this is how he made his video. Still, he probably got a lot of views, so maybe it worked, maybe it didn't. But when you're using it, please investigate what frequencies you are allowed to operate in for the device. You can find that usually by looking at the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC. Please do this. All right, I think that'll get us covered by the lawyers?
Yeah.
Hopefully. Now with that, here are our sources. We used a lot of them. Yes. On this source, I'd like to also point out there's a lot of great free learning tools and opportunities. Please take advantage of them. They are not made for fun. They are made to help you. All right, with that, questions? Pick someone.
You in the front.
The Flipper being able to intercept NFC and stuff like that, does that also include like tap to pay type stuff?
Yes. Yes, it does. If I take my credit card out and scan it, I can see my number on the screen. The upside is if you're using like Apple Pay or something, it goes through a proxy, so it gives it a kind of a fake number. So that's kind of the way to get around that risk.
Could you write it onto like a chip that you could implant?
I guess you could. Just like, interesting, yeah. Yeah.
Now, we need to repeat the question when they asked us, just because they can't hear us on the mic. So,
Yes.
Do you have any experience with Amazon Sidewalk?
I do not. Yeah.
Network thing that is mixed with a bunch of different protocols, Aura, DLE, and stuff like that.
I can't say I have experience with Amazon Sidewalk like you asked, but I can say that in the art and science of RF investigation, you will often find that not everything has standardized protocols. For example, satellites. Satellites are a fantastic example of this because if you have a really expensive satellite, they're going to use standardized protocol. If it's really cheap, made by a bunch of students, they're usually probably going to make up their own protocols. So when you investigate new devices, new things, don't expect any standardization. Look at everything like it's a unique, magical unicorn, because it likely is.
Back there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
So the flipper, does it interface with like an external computer, or is itself a computer?
On board, it's just a microcontroller running a little operating system, but it can communicate with a computer. I've used it as like a USB to UART before, and there's some NFC cards where you have to pull the keys with the flipper, dump it to a computer, crack it, and then send it back. So there's a lot of that.
And we also have some prizes we have to hand out if you want to ask your question.
Okay, so she alluded to the origin of software-defined radio earlier. It was way back in the day. It was a U.S. military project. Does anyone know the name of that? I don't think so. I think we picked too hard of questions.
We did.
No.
Try again, because this is for something super cool.
Nope. Nope.
You might.
There it is.
So you're getting a cat sniffer, which is kind of cool. Now, for my question, for those that are under 18, is there anyone here that would like to ask me a question? Someone under 18, because I like helping youth learn. And this is the coolest thing to learn with. All right, what do you got? You said back corner.
What's the base range of the sniffer? What's the base range of the hertz you can?
Of the flipper?
Of the flipper, I believe it runs from about 300 megahertz up to 982, I believe. So you get a lot of stuff in the
Happy learning.
3 to 4. That's where most of your stuff's living.
Sorry, for youth starting their own lab, you know I'm going to help out. All right, are there any other questions? I think we have 5 minutes.
You mentioned pacemakers earlier in the presentation, and I was curious if hearing aids are also vulnerable to this.
All right, her question was on pacemakers and if other medical devices such as hearing aids were also vulnerable to this. I'm not going to speak conclusively because I haven't done the research, but I believe it could be feasible that many medical devices are vulnerable to RF attacks and could be. One of the, I guess, the most challenging thing that most people haven't been able to overcome is your classic jamming attack. So most things, if I jam it, that means creating so much noise that it just pollutes all the other waves around it. It's going to stop it no matter what. Kind of like a DDoS. Yes, actually, I do have there's a great paper I can recommend you. I do have some cards and some pens, and I can get you that article of what a pacemaker looks like. It's pretty cool.
Hey, let's keep it down, please. There's still question and answer going on.
Thankfully, I think the recall was already handled. From the news article that I was reading, it said, do not panic, explicitly. What? It was in the UK, so I think they've taken care of it, hopefully.
Probably not a fun process.
The videos are being recorded, and I'm pretty sure they post them online.
All right. If there's no further questions, thank you so much. We really appreciate you being there, and please reach out if you have any questions on setting up your own RF lab.